2, 1. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another exciting film journey here on Inside Movies Galore. I am one of your hosts, but tonight we are continuing our Halloween month with our good friend Dane, who has subjected us to a whole month of Why Don't You Tell Us, Mr. Kyle?
Subjected. I don't think it's been that arduous for people, but we have been watching not horror films despite the month. It just happens to be my birthday month. We've been watching the Rocky series. We've been watching the Rocky series, and right now we are on Rocky 4, which came out in.
You tell Apollo Creed this wasn't a horror film.
It was for him. But yeah, we are on Rocky 4, which was obviously the fourth installment in the Rocky series, came out in 1985 and was the most commercially successful out of all the Rocky films. And for a lot of people, it's the most beloved, even though I think in terms of a lot of objective critical analysis, it's one of the worst ones, but it's just that's where you get into that kind of interesting kind of critical versus popular divide that we'll get into as we go along.
That's why I like popular.
Yeah.
Critical.
Well, I really like this movie too, even though I acknowledge objectively I think it's one of the stupider ones, but I really love it. But yeah, 1985, written, directed by, and starring Sylvester Stallone as Rocky. And this time with Rocky's opponent, Ivan Drago, played by Dolph Lundgren, who was a newcomer at the time, and obviously went on to be something of a actor / bodybuilder,
action superstar.
Yeah, in his own right. Although not quite reaching Stallone levels of superstardom, but not really a slouch either.
But I think he did overtake our Apollo Creed. So just kind of like the movie.
That is true. That's true. I mean, Carl Weathers, I think, was a better actor out of all of them. But
still, I agree. Boy, he just didn't.
In terms of stardom,
unfortunately, didn't get what he deserved.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, this was indeed a commercial smash and produced a very successful soundtrack, and we will most definitely be getting into that as we go along. But yeah, this one is fondly remembered. And so who in the room has not seen this for the first time? Or sorry, who has not seen this before and has seen this for the first time?
I haven't seen it till this time.
Go for it.
First complete.
Oh, wow. Well, okay, good. We got some newcomers. So, Tammy, why don't you start us off?
Well, like I said on our previous ones, I wasn't really sure I was going to get into all these Rocky movies. It's not really my thing. But,
they grow on you, don't they?
Yeah, they do, because I'm sure that David will probably tell you when it was, in the last match, I was there going, "Go Rocky, go Rocky!"
Yeah, they tend to do that.
But
yeah,
I thought it was. I thought it was good. I mean, it Dolph, that's his name, right?
Yeah, Dolph Lundgren, or the character's name's Ivan Drago.
But he was just like, he was scary, and then
he was.
And then he wouldn't talk at all, It was just
he talked a little.
Yeah.
You're gonna lose. If he dies, he dies.
Yeah.
I'm going to brick you.
Yeah, I think he had
like
2 lines in
English.
Anything.
Only his little wifey would say stuff, which she wasn't little either, But
that became Sylvester Stallone's wife.
Brigitte Nielsen for a brief period of time, and they, if I recall, they had something of an awkward. I don't want to get into that, but it was they had a not so great marriage, and they've had awkward run-ins since then. But but you liked the film overall?
Yeah, I did like the film overall. For the most part, of course, feel bad about what I'm sure everybody else felt bad about, the one part, of course. So, but we'll get there.
Indeed, we will. Now, Jake, this is your first time all the way through?
Yes. As I said before, I think I've seen most of this did not trigger much memory for me. So my guess is that I had probably seen one or both, or at least part of one or both of the fight sequences, like the big fight sequences. I'm actually kind of wondering if I didn't see more of 3 than I thought when I was, in these earlier viewings. But I have very little memory of what came in between the fights. And I certainly do not remember the robot. So
only the best character
you'd
in
think
the
I would
entire
remember
franchise.
I forgot the robot too, and I don't understand why.
We will expound upon the robot later, but go ahead.
Yes. It is it was oh, sorry. I also do I knew a lot partly because this one really does. One thing that I've heard said about this one is that it has a little bit more of a narrative focus than the other movies tend to do, which is pretty much the truth. It's and I apologize for that ringing in the background. Someone decided to choose now to call. But it is a little more focused, and yet there was a point I was going to. Oh yeah, partly because of that, and partly because if I had the option and I elected to try to get ready for next week's Helsing discussion instead, I was sorely tempted to go ahead and put on Creed following this one, because more than any of the other films, this one directly sets up Creed. And so I definitely...
Creed 2?
Huh?
You mean Creed 2?
Creed 2 was the one with Drago's son, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Well, still, the whole idea of if I remember correctly, Adonis grew up hating Rocky, if I'm remembering correctly.
No.
What was it I'm remembering?
You need to watch the Creed movies again.
I do need to.
And
well, okay, it sets up the second one. We'll say
anybody that watches the Creed movies will get extra credit.
Well, I know I have the first
one.
I don't remember if I had the second one, but yeah. The problem is you put 2 movies on the final week, so it's going to be
Brandon did.
Yeah, I don't know what he was thinking there, but it would have made more sense to do in 4 and 5 and then Balboa.
No. 3 and 4 always belong together.
Well, whatever.
Yeah, they do. I have to agree with Crawler.
Should have done 5. And then the last movie should have been a horror movie. But
it would have made it easier to do Creed as a bonus. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. Point is, because I did see the Creed movies, I knew about Apollo's fate.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew it was coming. It would have probably been much worse if I had not known what was coming. It was still it was obviously very sad watching it play out. So the film definitely had some emotional moments. And I will say overall it is probably a little weaker than the others, but it was still entertaining, and I do give them points for kind of picking one point and sticking to it in telling a pretty straightforward story for this outing. But yeah, it was a good one overall. I'm glad I finally got to give it a proper watch.
Awesome. Now, Dave, I assume you've seen this many times before.
Oh yeah, I've seen this film countless times before. In fact, I think this is the one that I've seen out of all of them the most.
Yeah, it's the most
And
rewatchable, I think.
honestly, maybe I'm opposite of like the popular opinion because I think this is like one of the strongest films.
Mm-hmm. But no, the popular opinion.
The
People
popular
love this
opinion
movie.
is the
I
best.
can return and watch this film over and over and over.
Yeah, this is 100% a popcorn flick, but a darn good one.
And I just don't see anything wrong.
I say it's a
wrong
recent peanut butter cup flick.
I do think that this film came out around the time when, you know, the whole like illegal substances that all sports people were taking at the time, like Mark McGuire, Sammy Sosa, you know, things of that
People were more aware of that at the time.
nature were starting to come out at this time too, if I remember correctly.
I think you're about a decade early on those baseball
Maybe
players,
a decade
but
early,
yeah.
but at least when things were starting to come to light more often of
Right.
that type of thing.
Well, steroids and blood doping and things
Correct.
like that. Yeah.
So, and
I feel like there was a big Olympic scandal a couple years after this, right? Something like that.
Probably. I mean,
Oh.
that's one of the factors that's at play in this. I mean, the biggest thing is the geopolitical commentary, and that's going to be a big part of the discussion because, well, how can it not be? It's all over the movie, but we'll get there when we get there.
It's us versus them.
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, and Russia has always been that country that it has always been kind of an alien a part of the world. You know, they.
Well, they've never really had a true democracy. You know, they've had like a very brief stint of having something kind of close to it, and you know, but they've been slammed with like the Tsar, with the Soviet Union, with you know, the modern, you know, Putin era. It's like, you know, they need better than what they've gotten. But that's also part of why during the Cold War, why they were such, you know, good antagonists, because they were so foreign to the American way of thinking.
But I really like this film overall. Every time I see it, and I think it's always a good replay, and it's got some good moments. Some especially since Dolph Lundgren is so new in this film. I mean, he wasn't a View Kill before this, but this is where he started to shine, I guess.
Yeah, he was pretty brand spanking new in this one.
Yeah, they should have said introducing Dolph Lundgren.
I don't know. Was it his very?
No, but it's his most.
I was gonna say
his first biggest film is what I'm saying. That's what they usually do. It's not always the first, just you know, when it's their biggest role. You know, I mean, he's the main villain, and let's not sugarcoat anything. He's a villain. He's
unquestionably like even more so than Clubber Lang was.
I wouldn't necessarily call Clubber Lang a villain. It was villainous, maybe, but
no, Drago's a 100% bad guy.
Drago is a villain, you know, exactly. So there's a difference, you know. Yeah, was Clubber Lang a good guy? No, he was a bad guy, but he wasn't necessarily a villain. Whereas, you know, Drago, you can't say the same. He's a villain, you know. If he dies, he dies, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, Clubber Lang may not care, but he wouldn't say it. So I guess that's one of the differences.
Or he's a trash talker and just a brute in the ring, but you know, Drago's a villain, unquestionably. And I've seen Creed 2 now, and he doesn't really improve too much in all the time.
Well, no more spoiler alerts. I didn't even know he had a son, so.
Oh, well, it's not really a secret. They're all over the poster.
Well, it is too. It was a secret because I didn't know.
Well, now you do.
Exactly, you spoiled it already. Or they did, whoever they did.
Well, you're kind of on the subject, so you like this one the second best behind Rocky 3.
Yep.
And you saw this. Did you see him one after the other?
Well, I saw that. No. I never saw any of them one after another. Probably saw this closer to when it came out.
Okay.
I'm not exactly sure when, but probably close to when it came out. But yeah, I swear to God, Eye of the Tiger was in this one too, but it wasn't.
Yes.
And
Yeah, it was. It was the opening credit song.
I don't know. Maybe they didn't archive cut it out. It wasn't.
No, it was in there.
It
And
wasn't
it's on the
there.
soundtrack
It
too.
wasn't prominent the way it was in the
It
last.
Well, not-
wasn't
Not
even.
as prominent, no.
It
because-
wasn't in the copy that I watched from Internet Archive.
Well,
So-
it was in there though. It's the opening credit theme.
So that's why I said that if it had that, it would be. I would consider it one of the best movie soundtracks because it was.
It's on the
just-
soundtrack. Trust me.
Just feeling well, okay, but it wasn't on my copy. So I thought I remembered it being in there, but I also remembered it being in 1 and 2, and it wasn't. So that's why I was like, okay, maybe it wasn't. So, I don't know.
Yeah, your
Either
copy
way,
must be bad
the
because like
soundtrack,
every
just-
version I've ever seen has it.
the soundtrack just oozes 80s.
Oh yeah,
rock
we're gonna
and-
devote
and-
some time to that.
Oh yeah, I just
That's a
have,
good
I
description.
have to.
It
I
deserves
have
it.
to mention that. Another thing I wanted to mention is, even though this is the most popular film, it is the shortest film of the whole entire
Yes, it
series.
is.
Not by a lot.
Hour and a half.
On a couple. Not actually an hour and 27 minutes.
Short and sweet.
Yeah. But also, where everyone may think that it was Siberia they went to, they did not go to Siberia during the Cold Wars.
It was Wyoming.
There. It was Wyoming. It was Jackson Hole, Wyoming.
That's right.
That looked like Siberia. And I've never been to Siberia, but it looked what I would think the way Siberia would have kind of looked. So
It was
I think
good
they did a
enough.
good job on that. But yeah, I love the film. It is very sad at a point, but it's a motivation, super motivation. In Rocky, this is not about title. This isn't about going rounds. This is
It's personal
personal and getting vindication for his friend, and
for sure.
yeah, it's definitely a great film. Film wise, I'd say it's better than 3. Film wise, and even maybe the other 2. Film wise, I don't understand why the critics said that, but I never understand the critics ever. So, like I said, 3 is my favorite, but film wise, I think it's better. And it definitely was the most focused of them all.
Yeah, there's less
I
time
haven't seen-
wasting.
I haven't seen 6, but
You
I'm
will.
assuming. Right now. But I'm just saying, I'm assuming it's as far as I know 1 through 5, it's definitely the most. So, yeah, that's my
Cool.
opinion.
Now, Dustin, previously you had said that you watched them all in a USA marathon, and you feel like this one is pretty much on par with 1 through 4, if I recall.
Yeah, I think that still holds up. So I revisited this one again, and I'd say it's still like a really solid, strong movie. It's maybe not quite as good as Rocky 3. Like it maybe like dips very slightly in quality, like maybe by like not a full point, but by like a little bit. But it does kind of break the formula that they were following, like a little bit at the very least, in that it's got kind of this like extra like political message to it.
Mm-hmm.
You need it on your lips.
It kind of speaks to like what the times were like.
Oh yeah,
So
this is a good film to watch in like a Cold War studies class because it's pretty much inseparable from the attitudes of the period.
exactly.
I love Rocky's speech at the end of the way there, but just
We're gonna get there. Trust me, that's
just to
worth
point
talking
it out.
about. It is very worth talking about. But yeah, you like the movie, you like Drago, everything.
Drago's a pretty cool villain.
Yeah, he is.
In that he doesn't really do much, but he doesn't necessarily need to. Like
He looks scary.
Apollo, Apollo Creed and Clubber Lang were like big, loud personalities, and Drago, I mean, he's big, but he's not really loud, you know?
No.
So he's kind of. I saw somebody talking about like slasher characters, and he reminds me a little bit of what somebody said there.
Yeah.
And they said, quote, Michael isn't a big, loud personality like Freddy, but he's also not just a silent killbot like Jason. And Drago is more like the killbot, kind of.
Yeah.
And we get a weird robot in this, too, for really no discernible reason. So,
We're going to
Because it was awesome.
We're going to devote some time to that robot.
Because 80s.
Exactly. Because 80s is awesome.
We are going to devote some time to that robot, let me tell you. 'Cause it deserves mentioning. Anything else?
I can't remember the music in this one as much, but Eye of the Tiger is such like a strong theme that they used in the third movie that, well, what else was gonna be that good, you know?
Oh, we got some stiff competition in this movie, and again, we'll get into that. Because Rocky IV, the soundtrack sold extremely well, and for good reason. It's got some kick-ass songs on it.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I can't remember it as much. That's kind of weird.
That is weird. I mean, like, cause when I was a kid, like this, and I might as well get into my impressions now. But like when I was a kid, the soundtrack to this movie stood out so much to me. Like and also it's featured really prominently, but it's like I couldn't help but notice it. And like, and this music is throughout the movie to the point where in my head I kind of called it Rocky the Musical. And this was before there was a Rocky on Broadway, which there was for a very short time in 2014.
Really?
But yeah, in my head, I kind of almost called it Rocky the Musical because music drives this movie forward, and you can
completely. I love that. I love when they do
really,
that.
really, really tell that this was made in the MTV era because it is so short and sweet, and music dominates the movie. Like so many scenes in this movie, you could easily just take out and slap on 80s MTV, and you'd have an instant music video.
Right.
The timing of the editing is perfect, and it just the
They
music
even
does drive
had
the
the
movie
Alvin and
forward.
the Chipmunks Christmas.
Oh yeah, I
song
forgot
in
that
there.
was in here. Yeah, and this is a Christmas movie too. It is because the fight takes place on December 25th.
Yeah.
But
In Russia.
Yeah, in Russia. So you got
Indeed.
snow. But yeah, as far as my impressions, yeah, I saw this one. I saw 1 through 4 all in a row on AMC, I think it was. And this one I remembered liking more than 3 because 3 has possibly
Blasphemous.
better. Well, 3 I think had some stronger dramatic elements to it, like with Rocky and Creed himself. I just think that there's some time wasting that we have to get through in order to get to the really good stuff. But like this one isn't dealing with perhaps as many things as the other movies had done, but I agree with everybody. It is the most focused out of all of them. It's short, it's sweet.
It cuts off the fat. But
yeah, it really does. It's a very lean, mean movie. Very straight to the point. Not terribly deep. I think it's probably arguably the most shallow. Well, on a certain level, I think it's arguably the most shallow of all of them.
I would say it's pretty deep in some ways.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. Like just on a basic storytelling level, I think it's pretty straightforward and doesn't have a whole lot of depth to it. And yet, at the same time, in terms of the kind of socio-political stuff, it has quite a lot.
And emotional.
Yeah, well, the emotions are really strong in this too. But like I'm saying, like in terms of as a time capsule of the politics of the period and the geopolitical situation, it actually has quite a lot to it. So
yeah, stuff that most people don't care
it's
about.
interesting in that way. But yeah, I actually like it more than 3. Even though objectively this one does get kind of ridiculous on a lot of different fronts. We will definitely get into
Ridiculous.
a little bit, but I mean, the funny part is and I've said this before, but like with this movie, like with the other movies, you could basically do a super cut of these movies because they do start with a brief recap of the previous movie, and you could easily stitch them together. and you'd
Yep.
have one big long movie, and you have a little bit of the recap of the fight with Clubber Lang, and you get a reestablishment of the relationship between Rocky and Apollo, and then right smacking after that, it leads right into Polly's birthday party with the robot. Like, they don't even give you much of a chance to breathe before you're just slammed in the face with the robot, and it's
The
just
best freaking character.
oh yeah, that best character in the whole franchise. But it's like, what is a robot doing in Rocky? It's like I think if you're like a film critic and you remember kind of
Get nerds to watch Rocky.
I guess so, but like if you were a film critic of the time and you were watching these movies when they came out and you remembered how kind of small scale and gritty and scrappy the first one was, and then you fast forward to 4, you got a robot blooping around in the background, you're like, what has become of this series? And yeah, the robot's just kind of there, it just but again, when I was a kid, I loved it. I was just like, yes, we got a robot in this. And
That's probably why it was there.
I think so.
Merchandising.
I
Yeah,
think
exactly.
so. I think it
but
was
they
there.
didn't. They didn't ever like capitalize on that.
Well, apparently, after Rocky 4, there was a lot, not so much the robot specifically, but there was a lot of talk to try to get Rocky into the G.I. Joe franchise, if you can believe it. So I no, it's true. And it didn't ultimately pan out, but well, basically what I'm saying is
Rocky punches Cobra.
I do think they were probably thinking about kids somewhat when they were doing that. But again, it's just like, of all the things, you would not think that a robot would be in Rocky, But like at the same time, like watching it again, I look at the dynamic. You've got your patriarch, the wife, the kid, the uncle, and a robot, and it's a sporting family and all that stuff. I'm like, this sounds like Speed Racer, doesn't it? You got an over the top villain, you've got I don't know what it is, but it's like I could easily see that as like an 80s kid show, get Apollo in there, give them like a jet that can turn into things. It's like that wouldn't be unheard of in the 80s,
Speaking of speed racing, I'm just seeing here, it has been calculated that Rocky 4 is 31.9% montages.
That's right.
And that the second half is about 50% montage.
Oh yeah. Well, any person from like the 21st century on the 2000s to now, that has ever made fun of a montage, this is the movie they're thinking of, because this took what the original did as far as montages and perfected it pretty much, turned it into its own art form.
I have no doubt this movie was a huge influence on the making of Team America.
Oh, totally.
Particularly
Team
the
America,
songs.
fuck yeah.
But well, yeah, both. We need a montage and America, fuck yeah.
Yeah. All that. Well, and also,
in America.
well, I know for a fact that Eye of the Tiger directly influenced Now You're a Man from Orgasmo. If you listen to those two songs back to back, they're basically the same. But yeah, this movie really did perfect the art of the montage. Another thing that you could probably study in film classes. Well, and many have, but like I doubt that they've necessarily used Rocky 4 as the example. But they should, because this is a very good example of it. But yeah, there's just a robot.
Yeah, like artsy-fartsy.
Well, there's just like a robot in the first third of this movie that really doesn't do much outside of maybe just having kid appeal and also having someone for Polly
and
to
laughter appeal.
Well, for someone for Polly to play off of, and I love it when he reprograms it with a woman's voice. She loves me. That's just
okay.
awesome.
Okay, so this says that Stallone said he saw it at a party and was amused by it, so he wanted to include it in the movie. But apparently, it went on tour with James Brown for a while after this.
Nice.
I know with the director's cut, which I'm sorry to say I have not seen yet, but when it comes out on 4K, I hope they include it along with the theatrical cut. I know that he specifically cut out the robot partially because he wanted to make it a kind of sort of more serious movie, but I think also because the royalty payments for the design of the robot were adding up. From what I
For
heard,
shame.
yeah, which is sad. So our R.I.P. the robot, in the director's cut. And again, I haven't seen it, but I've heard that
Funny, director's cuts are usually longer, not shorter.
yeah, I was gonna say it was I think a little bit shorter.
Supposedly his original cut was an hour longer, but then they went back. And incidentally, I missed the discussion for 2, unfortunately, so I don't know if it was brought up. But it's interesting. I don't think we mentioned tonight yet, and I don't think we mentioned last week, that apparently Stallone directed basically all of them but the first one.
It
And
was
the
burned up a lot.
one.
Okay.
It burned up a
Yeah.
lot.
He directed all of
Yeah.
them but 1 and 5.
Oh, he didn't do 5. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I just saw this. This was his last one till Balboa. Sorry.
Yeah. Well,
But
and
yeah,
obviously not counting the Creed movies, but yeah, he directed all but the first one and the fifth one.
So people don't really give him a lot of credit as a director, but these are perfectly good films for someone who hadn't done a lot of movies.
But he's directed a lot of movies that he starred in, but then he also directed Staying Alive.
Right.
He's directed movies that you wouldn't have necessarily expected.
Right.
But
yeah,
yeah,
he's a better director than.
And
I mean, when you mention Sylvester Stallone, I automatically think action, super action. Here actor.
Yeah.
To me, and or just an actor. I don't even think director, even though I know he directs. It just doesn't even pop in my head until we start talking about him directing. It's like, oh yeah.
Well, I think you make a fair point though, Jake, that not enough attention is like so first off, people think the way that you think, Kroll, and that's the image that he largely rode to glory and financial glory with a lot of his movies in the 80s and 90s is like the action superstar. But then the secondary thing people think of him is as a writer, and then probably tertiary is as a director. But
actually, I wasn't even thinking about him as a writer either. I'd say director. For me, director would be second.
Interesting. Well, but again, the Rocky, the first one, that was his script, but he didn't make it happen because he wasn't as experienced at the time. But it's and he really, when he has the right story that's really in his heart, I think he's got great skills at writing and even directing here. I think again the editing in here is really, really strong. It's got a great sense of taste.
Didn't edit out the robot in the theater version.
Yeah, which R.I.P. robot. But yeah, the robot is just kind of there. But I loved it when I was a kid, and I think they really do kind of.
I loved it, and I wasn't really a kid when I saw it, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I could imagine someone with Rocky's wealth and disposable income might get a kick out of that. And obviously, we've seen him do some similar things even when he was freshly kind of sort of wealthy after the first fight. He got the car and the jacket and all that stuff.
Speaking of the car, I would like to point out, as fancy and nice looking as those cars are that he has now, I still love the Trans Am better.
Yeah, well, here's the part I didn't get is so he's driving around a Lamborghini, but he's the Italian stallion. So wouldn't you think he'd want a Ferrari or something horse themed? Because the Lamborghini,
Mustang.
Yeah, Mustang, something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's we get some fun times with the family, but we get into introducing Ivan Drago more or less right away. And I don't know what the restrictions would or wouldn't have been at the time for someone from the Soviet Union boxing, but obviously he enters the scene, and Creed is really not happy about it. And I find Creed's his decision to do this, to go in against Ivan Drago, I think it's an interesting one because he too is living a comfortable life like Rocky. He hasn't fought for 5 years. And he sees this guy coming in. He's really kind of up in arms about it, much more so than Rocky is. And I think they kind of frame it up as him basically not wanting to be irrelevant anymore, because I think he is kind of feeling like he's not
Yeah.
relevant anymore.
Yeah, no one asks for his autograph anymore. No one knows, even really talks about who he is.
Yeah, so I think it's a couple things. I think he just, as far as his personal pride, I think he doesn't want to be forgotten. And then
Of course,
also,
then he
like,
gets his infamous USA short
oh,
shorts
that's
and everything too.
well, Living in America, that's probably in my top 5 favorite scenes in the entire franchise.
It's a great scene.
Love it. But, I think it's him not wanting to be forgotten, and also, he really did well, especially in the first fight, and I suspect probably before that, he really did kinda wrap himself up in a form of patriotism, and then he sees the Soviet Union coming in, and I think he feels really kind of threatened by that. And I think that gives his character some added dimension, because he really does. If anything, he really embraces that more, again, even more readily than Rocky does, and his story is kind of that
Yeah,
rags to riches story.
I love how you don't see his wife trying to talk him out of it. You don't really see much of his wife, but you
Yeah.
see Talia instead, Rocky's wife, trying to talk him out of it, saying that why would he want to do what? He's retired, he hasn't fought in 5 years. What brings him to want to fight this guy? Not even fight again, but just to fight this guy that looks like a killer. And just from what we saw, and and she just gets up and walks out, and like his wife would do. Like
Yeah, I
she
found
was
that
like
kind
his
of.
wife and Rocky's wife at that
Yeah,
moment.
I really like that scene because, well, it
Yeah.
gives her something else to do besides concern herself just with Rocky, because
Yeah.
they haven't really had much of a scene together prior to that, so I thought that was nice. But also, I really like the dynamic that they have as as two friends, and then as a husband and wife. You see the character dynamics that we've been observing for 3 movies now also just come to fruition in a different way than we're used to
Yeah.
seeing. But you also completely buy that they've probably had quite a few dinners together, and they probably are really good friends now and everything. And then who should come blooping in is the robot again, and you love looking at Carl Weathers' face when he's looking behind him, and he's like, "What?" That was like the last thing he expected to see was a
That
robot.
robot has a bug head though. Why does it have a bug head? It looks like a fly head.
Oh, I love that head on him. It
It,
looks like.
it is cool, but it's also creepy.
Oh, I love it. I love the look of the robot. But like, yeah, just you look at Carl Weathers' face, and that was the last thing he expected to see, and then the robot just comes in and talks in the woman's voice, and then he's like, "So as I
What
was
the heck
saying,"
is that, man?
yeah, he's like, "So as I was saying,"
How does it walk like that?
it's like he just had to get back to this serious dialogue scene. And when I was watching this back, knowing that the robot was cut out of the director's cut, and I was like, well, how else could they communicate this information without the robot? And I looked at it and I was like, well, again, the robot's kind of extraneous. I could see
Maybe I saw
how
the director's cut first somehow. I
maybe,
mean,
but like it's the director's cut. I was just thinking about it. I was like, you could cut out the robot and you really wouldn't lose much of anything as far as like how a character gets from A to B. There's not
that's
that.
true.
Yeah,
It
it's
was, it
really
was a
just
little
kind
bit
of
of
there.
comedy relief that was good to have. I mean, we
I mean,
need it.
we all remember it, so obviously it did its job. But it's just kind of funny to think about, But yeah, I like seeing Adrian get some more business besides just thinking about Rocky 24/7, because
Yeah,
and yeah, that is kind of her job as his
and
wife and all that stuff.
but she kind of backed up Rocky 100% with this one. I mean,
Yeah.
okay, she was a little bit like, "Why are you doing this?" at first, but then when she ended up showing up and telling him that she's behind him no matter what, and
Well, okay, here's a line that kind of so Polly apparently he really likes comics. Like at the end of that
Yeah.
scene, and that line never like stuck out to me before. But again, it's just kind of like I guess a little comic button on the end of that scene. But I remember he saying that I was like, why don't I remember this? But that was just kind of weird. It was really out of nowhere. But again, that I guess that maybe is kind of the point. But
So if they
yeah,
cut the robot out, what did he get for his Christmas birthday present?
I don't think they have that scene in the director's cut.
So they cut out the whole birthday too.
Yeah, I think they did, but again, I haven't watched it myself. That's just what I've heard from people who have seen it. But yeah, it's just
Well, the whipped cream was a little bit of a fun comedy scene as
that
well.
was fun. That was funny too.
Kid hits him with all the whipped cream.
Yeah.
And then they said the candles are out, and I'm like, no, there isn't. There's still 3 more.
Well, I like the exchanges that Rocky and Apollo have in the beginning or the first half of this movie because
Oh yeah.
now they are unquestionably really good friends now. You can see how when they were once I don't know, bitter rivals isn't really a good term. Maybe
Just
friendly.
rivals.
Yeah, just rivals for sure. Unquestionably at the top of their game. They were there, but it's like they have enormous respect for each other now. They might as well be brothers.
I think there were more rivals in the second movie than there were in the first, because the first one he didn't really consider him any kind of challenge. Rocky just thought it was so much of a challenge that he didn't even have a chance, but he still, did the best he trained the best he could, even though he thought he was completely outclassed. So
Yeah.
it really wasn't until the second movie where they were big rivals, and that was mostly because of Apollo Creed wanting to get him in the ring because he was feeling like a less of a man.
Yeah, but I think that his motivation to do what he does is very in character because
Oh yeah,
as skilled as he was, and he most definitely was,
like he said, he's a Rocky fights great.
The
but
way
he's
I
a great
felt about
fighter.
it is he treated it the same way that he treated the Rocky fight. He expected to win and kind of didn't
Well,
fully train for it.
well,
Yeah,
it was
he kind of came in again like he did in the first Rocky movie. Just kind of come in more of a spectacle than anything. I mean, it is an exhibition, so it's supposed to be a little more spectacle.
And
But
he also didn't
he
look
should
at
have fucking took
previous
it way more
videos of
serious than he did.
Drago before he went into it.
Yeah,
too,
which
you know?
that's what I was getting at is that Creed's big character flaw is his pride. Always
Yep.
was. And this is a little different because in Rocky 1 he was doing it just purely as a publicity stunt, thought that he could just knock this guy out in 3 rounds, no big deal. It's several things. Like I said, it is kind of a personal sense of like patriotism being threatened, but then also on a much deeper level, it's that feeling of, being too old for the sport, being kind of forgotten about,
It has
etc.
been.
Yeah, and that impacts his pride directly. So when people are in desperate situations or they're grasping at straws, and they will kind of regress a little bit, and you definitely see him going back to what worked before, which was the spectacle, which was, something having to do with patriotism, but this one is amped up to 11 with James Brown of all people, delivering one of the funkiest tracks of all time. And that's probably a good segue into again the glue that holds this movie together, I think, which is the politics of the time. And nowhere do you see this movie's really, really good at contrast. And that's one of the things I like about it the most is that, you've got Apollo who has the gift of gab, talks fast, he moves fast, very charismatic. And then you've got Ivan Drago who almost never says anything and is just stoic, and he's a killing machine pretty much. And also their fighting arenas couldn't be more different. You've got, the venue is Las Vegas, and it's this incredibly, avaricious, tons of excess, tons of, everything, like up to and including this weird, I didn't even notice this the first, all the times I've seen it, but Apollo comes out on this giant bull's head with these creepy red eyes. And I'm like, man, like you think about other countries like that talk about the West as like the great Satan and all that stuff, and then it's like then you've got this like really almost like a cult looking bull on the stage, and it's just like wow, if you're looking at it through the eyes of someone like Ivan Drago, you're like, yeah, this place is full of just waste and greed and excess, and people being selfish and slothful and all that kind of stuff. So it's like, so you see that, but then again, you go to the Soviet Union and you've got, it's very militaristic and it's very, you know, restrictive and all the stuff we all know with the Soviet Union. So they do a great job of contrasting the characters as well as their venues. So it's just an example of kind of theme being communicated through behavior and through set design, through music, because what is it? Living in America is the song in that venue versus the Soviet national anthem in Russia once we get there. Um, but yeah, it's living in America. I think that has to be one of the top 5 most awesome moments in the entire series, just because I love James Brown so much. Like, is anybody else as big of a James Brown fan here?
Not me. I mean, I like him, but
Yeah, he's pretty cool. It is interesting seeing him. You talk about like excess and everything. Like we know Brown did some things off stage probably shouldn't have, but he also on stage he was bigger than life and that big poofy hair and everything. It was just like
well, the 80s was
but,
kind of a second wave
yeah.
for him.
Well, but I will say though, I know that song well. I think most people do. It's a well-known. It was one of his. I think it was like his last big hit.
Yeah.
I never associated it with Rocky. I didn't even realize it came from this movie.
Interesting.
I had no idea.
Well, it is from this movie, and well, that was kind of my introduction to James Brown as a kid. Was I saw, and that's I guess what endeared me to him so much, in spite of again his many character flaws as a person. But like, I
never pay attention to that.
I come out and I see this it's a musical number, like unquestionably it's that, and it's full of spectacle. It's just everything that would piss somebody like Drago off, but it's a spectacle, all right, and it gets you pumped up, and I think that's a good last hurrah for Creed, who again, he's not without his flaws as well, but like he understood spectacle and he understood how to warm up the crowd and everything. But obviously, that doesn't save him when it comes to the actual fight, and he kind of gets his ass beat, well, and fatally so. But it's one of those things that I do think to a certain degree he kind of has himself to blame, like we said, in terms of he wouldn't postpone the fight despite Rocky telling him to do that. He's like,
he wouldn't let Rocky throw in the towel.
Yeah, well, we don't know about this guy, and he's right. They didn't really do their homework. He just kind of rushed into this thing, and obviously, as we know, whatever Ivan Drago hits, he destroys. And oh yeah, I forgot to mention that. So that's a great scene as far as showing off his power, but the question that I have to ask, and it does tie into the socio-political climate. So around this time, the Soviet Union in the 80s, there was the arms buildup and everything, but they were also starting to kind of collapse under their own weight and their inability to kind of sustain themselves. So, and that's part of why they did eventually collapse. And but then here's my question. So they have all this tech, and I'm like, where did they get that from? Did they just develop it in house? Did they get it from somewhere else? Like, Because I mean, if you look at a lot of the countries that were behind the Iron Curtain, they were pretty inefficient and
Well,
pretty
hey, they had
technologically backwards. You
they
know.
sent a rocket to the moon, and they had cosmonauts and everything too. So they had a lot of stuff that America has, but they were
Yeah, like in the 50s, they had that for sure. But I'm saying like this is around when they were starting to decline. Maybe it wasn't in humongous,
probably
amounts.
because the government has money. Just because the country's poor doesn't mean the government's poor.
Yeah. Well, that actually leads into my next point, which is that because it is true that I think, again, if you look at like other countries that were behind the Iron Curtain at that time, like ones that were not Russia, like other countries that fell under there, they did tend to fall victim to a lot of inefficiencies and a lot of things that were not running well and not putting the resources into. So that does lead me to believe that this tech here,
Well, they were probably putting the resources into that
I was
rather
gonna
than
say because and
Yeah, that's what I'm
again
saying.
to get into so around this time also on both sides, America and Russia, there was a lot of posturing and a lot of military exercises and a lot of like what he says, well, Apollo says this is us versus them. That was very much the attitude of the time, and
Oh yeah.
it came out in the form of the arms buildup. It came out in terms of the culture war, in terms of kind of the excess of the 80s in comparison to the attempt to the communistic practices in the Soviet Union, and so it was very much of the time. But my theory here is that it's very, very likely that the Soviet government is putting everything they've got, like their hopes are ostensibly resting on Ivan Drago to give them some legitimacy on the world stage, and so they're going to do whatever they have to do to, create this absolute fighting machine. I mean, if you stuck him in a costume, Ivan Drago could be the Red Guardian for Marvel Comics, because he is basically like a super soldier, and that is one of the more ridiculous elements of this thing is like not necessarily impossible, I guess, if you gave someone enough steroids or whatever, but it's like, it's just they really do make him into like a James Bond villain. He's like, Jaws or something.
Yeah, it's kind
Right.
of funny. So when I rewatched it this time, I was doing it with reaction videos, just kind of spice it up. And one of the things somebody says was like, "Are they trying to recreate Captain America? What are they doing?"
That's why I said the Red Guardian, because that was in
Pretty much the same thing, exactly.
Yeah, in Marvel continuity, yeah, that was their attempts to recreate the super soldier serum.
right. And
I also wanted to. I had to step into the bathroom when we were talking about like Apollo's fight with Drago, but I always really liked kind of that scene because it shows like Apollo doesn't want to just like retire and quit fighting, but he has no idea at all what he's really getting into.
No,
He just like blunders into it.
he didn't do his homework.
And one of my favorite moments in the whole movie is he's just like, "Yeah, let's do this," or whatever he says, and just Drago just says,
"You will lose." Yes, love it. Oh, the part that I always loved in that scene is actually right before that when they're rattling off his nicknames, because he's got he gets like at least one new nickname each movie.
Right.
He's got like 4 of
How
them.
many
He's
names you
like,
got?
Right.
I know, I love that part.
Now,
that stuck out to me.
I do want to mention real quick the question came, or the subject, the question came up earlier of was this Dolph Lundgren's first movie? And I meant to mention it earlier, and Dane, you just triggered it when you called him a Bond villain. It's funny you should say that because his one previous role was as a bodyguard to a Bond villain in A View to a Kill.
Yeah, that makes sense. He would Ivan Drago would fit right in A View to a Kill, quite frankly.
Right.
So yeah, how appropriate. And that was in the same year as this one. But yeah, the fight itself is just a absolute beating. He gets beaten to death quite literally, and Rocky could have thrown in the towel, but he's like, "Don't you stop this fight." And again, Rocky's not a perfect
Not-
character. It never has been, and that's something he has to live with. And that does get explored in like the Creed movies, for example. But go ahead.
Now, one thing that I'm sure Rocky has probably wrestled with in all this self examination, but I definitely saw it mentioned in the trivia, and I'm like, oh, it's a good thing to point out. Drago wasn't exactly paying attention to the officials, and
No.
Creed kind of wasn't either, but Drago was just barreling on forward.
Mhm.
And there's a good chance if Rocky had thrown in the towel, it would have done nothing.
Yeah, that makes sense. Which the certain disregard for the rules plays into Creed too, but that's all I'm going to say about that.
Spoiler.
Oh, you're gonna forget about it.
No.
But yeah, the fight is really just an absolute brutal beating, and they set up right away just what an absolute animal Ivan Drago is, up to and including the thing.
He dies.
Yep, up to and including if he dies, he dies, and it's like, man, he barely has any spoken dialogue in this movie, but what he does say is very memorable, and that's a pretty cold-hearted thing to say to somebody.
Yeah, he's pretty honest.
straightforward.
He's an honest douchebag.
It's
Yeah.
like what you mentioned before, like when he meets Creed, he's like, I think he said, I will break you. And then I think with
Creed, he
no,
says
I
that-
will beat you.
No, with Creed, he says you will lose.
You will
You
And
will
then with-
lose.
Then with,
And then
with
His first
Rocky,
words
it's
spoken.
Against
says,
Rocky,
"I
he says,
must
"I
break
must
you."
break you."
Yes.
yes, which is one of the best villain lines in movie history, I think. Absolutely love it. But yeah, it's so one thing I never noticed as a kid because I didn't know my art history yet at the time. So you'll notice when Apollo dies and Rocky is cradling him in his arms, but the life is gone from his body. The pose, I don't know if this was intentional. It could have just been a happy accident, but the pose that they adopt is pretty much like Michelangelo's famous Pieta statue.
I still don't know my art history, so no, I didn't notice.
Well, look it up afterward, and you'll see what I mean.
I like how you expect most of us to know exactly what that is.
Well, it's the
Right?
Pieta, the very it's
I don't know anything
extremely.
about art. Don't want
Oh,
to.
you didn't study up on art so that you
I
could
like
fully
looking at
appreciate
I like
Ninja
looking at
Turtles.
pretty pictures of
I am a
art. That's what it. As far as art goes.
Biology kind of scientist.
Well,
I don't
so
know art.
okay, so for those of you who don't know, so the famous Pieta statue is sculpted by Michelangelo, and it's with the Virgin Mary cradling the crucified Christ who came
I
down
can
off the
see
cross.
it.
Yeah, if you look at the two poses
Virgin my
back
ass,
to
she was
back,
Mary.
if you look at the two poses back to back, they are very similar. And again, it could have just been a happy accident, but I was just like, oh wow, this is quite something. But then the other thing I didn't notice was so Apollo gets beaten, falls on the mat, and again, I didn't know what this was at the time, but he actually goes through death spasms, and that's not
Yeah,
a good
He
sign.
twitches a few times, and it's like, yep, he's dead.
Yeah, that's good. Knowing what that is now, I'm like, oh, that's bad, and obviously it is because he dies. But yeah, it's little details like that I picked up
I
on.
like how you noticed like the art pose, and I noticed like the death spasms.
Oh, well, I did
Yeah.
too. I knew it.
I didn't notice
Like I
either.
knew what they were right away.
Yeah, well, because again, I haven't seen this in a couple years, but
I
And
noticed the spasms too.
oh yeah, and that's a real phenomenon, especially
Right.
Well, I imagine with the kind of body and headshots he's taken, that probably didn't help either. But yeah, it's that's a pretty brutal beating, and so that is so. Some people have debated whether I think Stallone has even said that if he were to do it over again, he wouldn't have killed off Apollo. Which is interesting because to me that's kind of the emotional linchpin of the movie,
Yeah.
but then also the series going forward.
I mean, as much as you hate it, it needed to happen for the movie.
I think it's very important. Well,
Yeah.
obviously it's not fun to watch, but
Yeah, I mean, Creed's a
it
great
sets
character,
him off on
and it
his
sucks to
journey.
lose him.
I
Right.
know.
But
Well,
story wise, it was very very well done, very smart.
for sure. Well, it does. It mirrors the Mickey death, but in a very different way. It's a more direct way. And you also notice the difference in Rocky's reaction because, like, and I'm glad that that Stallone didn't play it the same way because we had already seen like the absolute
Yeah.
like breakdown blubbering in Rocky 3, which he managed to make. He managed to sell it in a way that I don't think most people
Yeah.
could have. Here, it's like he's losing a friend. He's losing almost like a surrogate brother, but he's a lot more restrained and but you can tell it hurts on a deeper level because like with Mickey it's almost like losing a father, and this it's like
Yeah.
a good friend or a brother, and so he treats it that way, but it also
Yeah.
it manifests in a different way because, and I say that in terms of the outward reaction, but then meanwhile if you'll notice from the second half of this movie, Rocky in all the other movies prior to this and after this, he has never been more focused, like laser focused than he
Mhm.
is in this movie. Because
I
like
love the training.
Yeah.
because what was it in 2 and 3? It was him kind of farting around, not really believing in himself, and then Adrian has to say something that gets his mojo back again, and then he's able to pull out a
Well, to
win.
be fair, in the second one, it was what she said to get his motivation bad in the first
Right.
place. So,
Well,
you know.
part of the reason I think why, and again, I did not like seeing Creed go. I thought he's a fun character, and I
Yeah.
like Carl Weathers in the role. But you're right; it does set up a lot of what comes later. But in a sense, he in this movie he starts kind of falling back into. He kind of rose out of it a little bit in the third movie by training Rocky, but he kind of fell back into the funk that he had already been kind of falling into for a while, which is very similar to Rocky was a victim of self-doubt quite a lot in this series. And, you know, and I think when Mickey died, that kind of fed into that self-doubt a little bit, but it was, like you said, a different sort of deal. Um, but Apollo's also dealing with that same thing, but he doesn't.
He
He's
doesn't really
not as
dwell on it.
He's not as receptive as Rocky. You could say, like Rocky is willing to lean on other people, Creed and Adrian and whatever. And Apollo just keeps pushing people away when they try to help. And
Yeah. Well, I
I
was gonna
think
say,
that might be why they decided
Paul's
to go.
attitude.
Yeah.
well, and it definitely shows the difference between them because I would be willing to bet that Apollo is perhaps not to say that Rocky is like the most introspective person in the world, but I would hardly say he's, not self-aware. I think he's more self-aware than Creed is. I think Creed's the kind of person that, just keep moving forward, keep the energy up, keep the image up, keep the crowd going. That's kind of
Yeah.
his style.
Oh, I
And
love when
so,
Rocky points out to him that he's not really fighting Ivan; he's fighting himself.
oh yeah.
And Creed says, "Oh, I think you're starting to get brain damage." And I'm like, "That's the most intelligent thing he's ever said because it's 100% true." And,
Well,
he
Yeah, it's
was
like I
fighting
said,
himself,
that was the thing that was crippling Rocky before, but he let Creed
Very
and
good.
Adrian turn him around. And the other thing is he keeps talking about how he's a fighter and that's his life and that's what he does because it's in his blood. And Apollo's the same way. But I think that they still have slightly different. What they get out of it is a little different. And Apollo is addicted to the crowd. He's addicted to being the center of attention in a way that Rocky isn't quite.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, you could easily.
Rocky wants to prove things to himself, where Apollo wants to prove things to himself too, but he also has to win over the crowd and be the center of attention.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, the word narcissist has obviously a bad
Right.
connotation these days, and I wouldn't. yeah, like Apollo is not a bad guy. I would never say that. That's why I said, like, you say that and people automatically assume the worst, but like, and I would
I
never
don't.
say that. I would never say that about him, but he definitely has that kind of need for the crowd's attention, the crowd's approval, to
Yeah.
not be, So like, and there are a lot of successful people that have that, and he.
A need for attention and validation is not quite the same as narcissism. There definitely is like I would say Clubber would be more of a
Yeah,
narcissist than
I would agree with
Apollo
that.
is. But definitely there it's just again Creed wants the whole world to love him, and Rocky, as long as he's got Adrian, he's pretty much he's good.
Yeah.
He
Well,
he loved having Mickey in his corner. He loved having Apollo in his corner. He loves having a kid who's
Yeah.
like really loves him, but really it comes down to Adrian. As long as he's got her, he's set.
Yeah, I was gonna say he knows how to rally the troops, the ones who really matter, and he keeps them close. And he's as long as he's got them, then he's supported. And you're right, Rocky's big weakness is always when he doesn't have self-belief, but when he does, he's unstoppable. And
Yeah.
that's ultimately what the series is about. But that's what I find so remarkable about this movie in comparison to the ones before and the ones after, is that Rocky has never been as laser focused as he is. Like, yeah, Duke Evers is in there and he does help out a bit as far as the training, but Rocky might as well have trained himself in
Oh
this.
yeah, yeah.
Like, it's
Yeah.
unreal,
It's great how he is trained, and I love how they're showing the differences. Like Rocky is straight up besides him punching the speed bag a little bit, that was the only traditional, um, the traditional he did, like training he did, because everything else was him, running through the snow, chopping down trees. I love that how they showed Drago's punching out this guy that's nowhere near as good as Rocky. Just some
Yeah.
guy,
Yeah.
and Rocky's cutting down a fucking tree. As big as Drago is, it's a fucking tree. True, he had an axe, but still, he cut it pretty fucking quick, and the tree went down. So I
Hey,
really love just how they showed him train. I mean, it wasn't like Drago wasn't training, but Rocky outtrained him because he went back to the pure roots of it. Like he didn't just, I mean, he trained like by doing actual work that's
yeah.
Yeah.
that trains you, that keeps you strong for years. Not maybe not shows you tons of muscle, but it keeps you strong. And that's what he did. He trained trained
Well,
himself to be
it
strong.
sets up it continues what I was saying before about the contrast, which this movie is really good at that with the visuals.
Yeah.
Because Drago is training with like the absolute state of the art training facilities. Everything is artificial and computerized and monitored, and
Right.
obviously he's getting a lot of help from steroids and everything. But like everything there is like the peak of what humanity can make, presumably.
Right.
But then meanwhile, Rocky's going back to nature and he's
Yeah,
doing it in this
exactly.
harsh environment of Siberia, which you don't get much harsher than that. In terms of the elements and everything, and he's doing it the old fashioned way, but and I absolutely love that visual contrast there. I think it
And
sets up the themes really well, but go ahead.
you should note that he is not entirely by himself. He does have
Polly.
Polly and Duke and eventually Adrian with him. And and you got to admit, you're talking about how impressive it is he chops down a tree. How about impressive it is to haul Polly around? That can't be easy.
Well, especially because there's no TV out here. Where's my comics? We'll crack out here.
I kind of felt a little bad for Polly because of the TV situation. Like this Rocky's there to train. I get it, but Polly doesn't really have a lot to do, even in training him. So he really doesn't really have anything to do.
Oh, he
well,
could use to have some of that training himself. He
right,
could
he
lose a
definitely
few.
could, but he's not going to. He also could learn to probably read a little bit more, but again, he's probably not going to go to. So I just felt a little bad
Right.
for him. I know I wouldn't want to be in that situation, but he does complain a lot, and that, and
and I want to mention, Duke found a way to keep himself occupied too. And
but dude just probably doesn't. He's a. You can tell he's a fit guy. He's a lot older than Creed was, and he's a fit guy. So he probably exercised a lot. We just didn't see it because he wasn't.
I'm not just talking about exercise. I'm talking about exercising brain too. And actually,
Yeah.
I haven't
So
heard
he probably
Dane.
read and exercised and stuff.
Polly's not exactly.
There's one specific scene that I'm trying to work my way towards because it surprises me that I haven't heard Dane mention the connection to The Shining. I don't know if he did in the second movie, but you got it was in The Shining, and supposedly he did. He is apparently a very skilled chess player in real life.
Nice.
And apparently did beat Stanley Kubrick at a game of chess during The Shining.
Wow,
and
well that would earn his infinite respect.
But yeah, it's like I would think that'd be a good way to pass the time with that. But I know it's not Polly speed, but
Yeah, don't expect the sophistication from Polly. I don't think
Polly would be more the sitting in front of all work and no play makes Polly a dull boy.
Yeah, something like that. Now, apparently the line "we'll crack out here." Apparently, that's not in the director's cut, which that sucks because that's a funny line. But yeah, that I don't know what. Again, Burt Young, like that character, could have gone so wrong so fast from the first movie, but just something about it. He knows how to. Well, in the first movie, like he knew how to give him. Like he was a very raw person, a very rough around the edges person, but you could somehow understand him and you knew that his worst enemy was himself. But then as the series goes on, he's still the same character, but he really taps into some of the comic relief aspects of his character, and especially
he does.
He's really not all that useful, but he's just so funny, because he's
I do love the way he finally like recognizes that Rocky basically carries him, and he's like and thanks him.
He basically says his goodbyes right as he's getting in the ring.
He thanks him, and he's just like thank you. I know people said drop that bomb and blah blah, and he's just like thank you for not dropping him, and he finally says thank you instead of Rocky, why don't you give me this? Rocky, why don't you give me that? Rocky, why is this?
That's who he was in 3.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he's definitely less abrasive here.
In the beginning at the birthday party, when he's like kept saying, "Oh, is my present in the driveway, in the driveway," and he's just like, "Oh, I'd rather have had a car than the robot." And he's just like,
dude,
he loves
really,
the robot. It's your birthday, you're gonna be that much of a dick about it?
Oh no.
And then of course he ends up liking the robot.
Once he learned how to reprogram the voice, he was good.
Yes, he was, but
because that's about the only woman he's ever gonna get, I think.
Right.
But yeah,
and look at it. When Talia's been married for all this time, he still doesn't have a woman, and he blames her.
And he has probably a lot more opportunities now, but still unmarried. Doesn't have to carry his sister anymore.
Not even a girlfriend.
I think it was funny how right before when they were going out to the ring, he's like telling them how he wishes he was him, and they get to the ring, and he said, when I said that, I
forget
don't
it.
mean that.
Yeah, I know that's probably all right, but yeah, the whole second half of the movie, in so many ways, is basically just montage after montage.
It is
as awesome as it is, and as amazing with the music and everything as it is. Like, there's really not a whole lot more to say in that respect. It's montage. It's the fight happens. Now, obviously, there's stuff that leads up to it, as far as like you see the contrast of the arena, you see the premier, who looks a bit like Gorbachev, but I don't see the
You see the definite differences in the training of the two.
Oh, for
Yeah.
sure.
You know,
Which, and
Rocky's doing the old school training without fancy equipment or any of this other stuff. You know, he's
Yeah,
going old school.
he's doing
You know?
very untraditional training. Basically, like I said, he's training his strength more than anything. You know, just pure strength. You know,
yeah,
nothing to
well,
do
and
with
endurance, because he's training
Yeah.
in the bitter cold. You know,
Yep.
Siberia is like one of the coldest places on the earth, practically.
You know, and he's doing it by picking up rocks and chopping trees and things like that. You know, and
Which
Drago.
I like that it was rocks because you know rocks mean a lot to Rocky.
Imagine
I
that.
like the
I do love
That
one
is
line. I do love one line in the fight though. I've seen three of them hit the one in the middle.
Yeah, that was funny.
That is kind of an interesting thing to note in the two different, like, I mean, the two training styles that they use are very different, but Drago is just going for like pure crushing power, like instead of trying to develop any technique or really anything beyond just how much force can you put
Right.
behind each punch. Like that's the
Yeah.
only thing they're focusing on.
Yeah, he
And-
really is just a brute force, you know, almost like what Doomsday would later be in the Superman comics. But
I did like
you
the
know-
training montage though because
Yeah.
it really helped in a way. It really helped to connect even more with Rocky though
yeah,
because he was putting his all into it, and he wasn't using fancy dancy crap or doing this. He was going, you know, he was training brutally, you know, training.
oh yeah,
know?
unquestionably. And well, and I again, for the sake of accuracy, I do like that he has this secret police escort everywhere he goes. You know,
Oh yeah,
Right.
that was another
'cause
funny scene.
that's very true to life. I know when they were filming Amadeus, and that was in Czechoslovakia, in Prague. You know, that was still under behind the Iron Curtain, and they
I
had
had to chuckle a little bit too because when Rocky's trainer was playing chess with one of them, he won, and I was like, I'm not sure if you really want to win against these guys.
yeah, maybe not, but
I'd be
well,
like Chewie, maybe you should let him
Right.
win.
something like that. But
So-
Might cost you an arm and a leg.
well,
I
that-
like when he ran away from him and went way up high on that. That
Right.
was some
Oh,
awesome
yeah.
scenery.
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
he
That
ended
was
up
an
on top of
impressive
that
scene.
mountain.
Yeah,
Well,
that was funny when they
I-
crashed into the side trying to catch up to him.
I
yeah.
had a couple of random things I wanted to throw out. One being that as far as his training styles being different, I think Tammy, you said the pure crushing force for Dragon. That was a good way of putting it. But it's interesting, and I don't know if this is true, but I mean, I don't know if this is a thing. I haven't really seen anything one way or the other, but this movie did come out the year after The Karate Kid.
Yeah.
And
Which John G. Avildsen directed.
Right.
Yeah.
And there were also some connections with the music. Bill Conti did the music for Karate Kid. That's why he wasn't on this one.
Yeah.
And I think
And
one of the
Piccolo.
songs that was supposed to go in Rocky 3 went into Karate Kid and something like that. So there was some musical overlap. But just thinking about it, like Daniel, I believe it is, it's been a while since I've seen this. He balks at this very non-traditional training that he's getting from Miyagi.
That's right.
Whereas his
Rocky
opponents
embraces it.
Yes, but that's what I'm saying. Like, I wonder if that had an influence on his decision to go that route with this one. I don't know. Maybe it did, maybe it didn't. But
Interesting comparison. I never thought of that.
But a couple of, like I said, little random things. Y'all mentioned the line about hit the guy in the middle.
Yeah.
I love that too. I thought it was a great line. But looking through the trivia, supposedly that is a long-standing boxing story.
Makes sense.
That apparently in a fight, I think it was Schelling and I want to say Lister or something. I don't know my boxers very well. But one I do know is Jack Dempsey. During this fight, one of them made that same remark that I'm seeing three of them, and Dempsey supposedly was in his corner and said, "Hit the one in the middle."
Mhm.
So they were directly quoting Jack Dempsey with that line. So that was kind of fun.
Oh yeah.
And then you're talking about like people. Someone said something about similarities, and I was just wondering if anyone else felt this. I don't know if I've thought this before about Michael Pataki, who played the one of the Russian delegation.
Mhm.
But I was watching this at first. I was like, that dude looks so much like Ian Holm.
A little bit, yeah.
Anyone ever see? I don't know. I just
I didn't
threw it
think
out
of
there.
that, but yeah, I could see that.
It
but
confused me at first. I was like, Ian Holm's in this? No.
I wish that would have made it awesome, even more
I
awesome.
was like, he does a great Russian accent.
That would be awesome. Well, that actually, before I forget, I wanted to mention something. Which was so we mentioned before the first fight with Drago with him and Creed that because Rocky by now he knows that you think it might be you against you, like because he's been there for 3 movies now, so he knows that all too well that when you go in the ring you're fighting more so yourself than even your opponent. So he knows that going in, but then he gets to Russia here, and Duke reminds him that you're gonna be tested. This is you have to basically go through hell to get to have any hope of beating this guy. But once you're through, then it'll be worth it. And that's part of what motivates his decision to do it kind of au natural, as they say, out there in the elements. But then the other big thing that I think is because people have asked, how does he win this fight? Because he just basically outwills Ivan Drago. But then the key factor to the whole thing, I think, is what he says he and Duke say to each other, which is no pain. So I think part of it is psychological. It's this idea that, Rocky is, yeah, he's not training with all this technology, but he's doing it in Siberia. So he's going through this hellish, place in terms of the elements, but then he's also having to mentally tell himself that he's not going through all the pain he's going through in the actual fight itself. And I like that there's a psychological component to it that feels like a natural progression of where Rocky had been in the 3 movies. Because as we know, his biggest strength is the self belief, and when it's not there, then he, doesn't do well. But when it is there, he can succeed, and so he has to factor in that added element of no pain to ultimately win this thing. Because again, in terms of just pure strength, obviously Ivan Drago has him well beat, and obviously to a very illegal degree because of the steroids and everything. But I just think that's a critical thing to bring up for why he even wins this fight. And
And
obviously,
another good thing is too, Rocky gets knocked down quite a few times in the fight,
yes, he does.
and gets back up. Whereas Drago, he only got knocked down once, and he just couldn't get up. He
Yeah.
tried twice to get up, but he couldn't get up.
Well, and the other thing that is really important in the actual fight itself, kind of the thing that because again, Drago, his whole facade is that of the kind of impervious, unconquerable, unkillable monster, basically the machine man, ostensibly. And then Rocky lands that perfect hit to the face that cuts him just a little bit, and it proves that he can indeed bleed, that
Yeah,
he
he's
is a
human.
man.
He's
And they
human.
say that explicitly because
Yeah, like he's not a machine, he's a human.
well, and that was the biggest. Well, actually, again, contrast. So that was the biggest thing that the West, didn't like about the Soviet Union, was the idea that, everyone was more or less the same, and that it kind of trains the humanity out of you, etc. And nowhere is that more clear than what they say, what both sides say to each other when he does land that one hit and he does cut him, which is, Duke was like, yeah, you wounded him. He's a man. He can bleed. He can feel. And then what does Drago say? He's not human. He's like iron. And so again, that just shows their different mentalities. One of them is, it's the fact that, oh yes, he is indeed a man, versus the man who's being made into a machine can only think he can only think in terms of something that isn't human, which is
He's
a
this
piece of
beast.
iron.
He's this beast that has been bred from the very beginning to be a certain breed,
Mhm.
and in his mind, he thinks that he is the ultimate, most powerful, and cannot be defeated. And when he gets, the minimal amount of damage that he's ever taken, he is unbalanced.
Yeah, he can't fathom it. It does not compute, quite literally.
And I actually was amused by him calling Rocky a machine. Like the way he said, like he is like iron.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I was kind of amused. I'm like, dude, you're pot calling kettle black, as it were.
Well, that's the point, though. Is like I think because he's been in that world so much, that's all he can. That's the only way he can conceptualize anything. So, and as far as he's concerned, that's that would be really earth shattering for him. And so I think this movie does contrast really well, and that's one of the best examples. And it does it in terms of the visuals, but also the dialogue. But yeah, the fight basically is him just kind of outwilling Ivan Drago, and also being able to take his blows, blows that Apollo couldn't take, because Apollo's big weakness was always the body, couldn't take body shots very well. But yeah, he basically just has to have that will to survive and to endure. And also, I think he probably just wears Drago out, because I don't think Drago probably expected to have to fight that long, and like Dustin said, yeah, he was just trained for just pure destructive force, and he wasn't really trained to probably go that long, to have to go that long. Now he doesn't do the Clubber Lang tactic of swinging as hard as he can each and every time, but nonetheless, it's kind of that same idea of somebody.
I'm surprised he didn't.
Yeah, well, it's that same idea of somebody who fought a lot harder than he thought he'd have to, and again, it's just Rocky just has to persevere, but I think that's just a really, really interesting. And I think Rocky endures because of that psychology of just telling himself that he's not feeling the pain that he's feeling, which obviously, as we later learn in Rocky 5 and onward, that, indeed he doesn't come away from the fight unscathed. But I think that's just an interesting thing to point out. But a notable departure from what I've heard in the director's cut is the ending there with the if I could change, you could change, everybody could change, and the Russian premiere and everybody there cheering for Rocky.
Yeah.
What I know in the director's cut is apparently they're really, really pissed, which quite frankly is probably a more realistic reaction, especially
It was, but it definitely showed what can be accomplished when we all work together and things, and that speech was extra special. Realistic, no, but it's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be inspirational, and that's what it was. It was very inspirational, and very uncharacteristic of Rocky, because he's not usually the speech giver. That was Creed, and just like his insight into Creed, that wasn't really Rocky like either. But it shows how much Rocky has changed from the beginning. He's more philosophical. He not only understands himself, he understands others. And that speech is, it really shows how much he's learned to read and understand things. And
at that point in time, he was a stranger in a strange land, and he was representing the United States of America. And at one point in time, that meant something to Americans.
Yeah,
and everybody.
It doesn't as much anymore, but
Well, there's a good reason for that.
It's I mean, I think also the whole like going over to kind of a hostile nation thing, that's probably not as common either, but the if that were the case, then I imagine that the need for that would probably be there more. Doesn't necessarily mean they do it, but the moment definitely called for it, or called for something. And
Besides, it's probably worth noting that realism got chucked out the window with that match in the first place. But
well, and with the robot and everything else, I mean,
right.
let's not kid ourselves. This thing is like, there's a again, not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but there's a reason why Rocky 5 couldn't hope to match this one, because this is like the only way you could have gotten more ridiculous is if they'd have fought on the moon or something, And James Bond went to the
Rocky
moon.
16.
Yeah,
Rocky fights Martians on the moon.
or Rocky 5000, like in Spaceballs. But like, yeah, really, like,
Indeed.
I mean, James Bond went to space in Moonraker, and that didn't really do him any favors, and they could have put Rocky on the moon. That's the only way you could have matched or supersede the ridiculousness of this one. It's like we got the robot, we got the super Russian, we've got all these things that just are absolutely shark jumpingly ridiculous, but they're just and I'll get into this in a little bit, because I do think there's a reason why, yeah, we might laugh at it, but like this movie, I think it's not insincere in all of its corniness and all of its things that would probably not happen in real life. It is a sincere film, and I think that's really what kind of carries it. um because if this were cynical in any way, then I don't think it would have would be so beloved as it is. But this thing is a heartfelt film, and I think that really kind of carries it through in spite of all the things that probably wouldn't happen. Because like if indeed the Soviet government, as wanting to keep up appearances as it was at that time, if they had invested so much into Ivan Drago technologically and everything, if he gets humiliated, then they probably would be pissed. So, I mean, just for the sake of realism, that probably makes a little bit more sense. But and also, it's just like, again, I just don't believe that they would necessarily have done that. But then again, I mean, Gorbachev was kind of one of the key factors in why the Soviet Union ultimately got reformed and then eventually fell, dissolved. So I mean, if ever there was a time for that sort of thing to resonate, it probably would have been then. But yeah, it's, as far as a fight goes, they quite possibly put the most work into this fight in terms of the staging, in terms of the slow-mo, the insert shots, just how to shoot a fight. This is probably the most glossy out of all of them. Because again, you compare this to like the fight in the first one, it's like, wow, they've really come leaps and bounds. This one is very slick, very obviously Hollywood. But that is also where a lot of the sound, like people have talked about the sound effects of this thing, that that some of the sound effects in 3 and 4 are just so heavy that it's like sledgehammers practically. But again, that is kind of part of the whole commercial appeal, I guess. But we did touch upon some montages a little bit, which that does get into, you can't have a montage without the music that goes along with it, and oh boy, does this movie have some music. It's
Yeah.
got so much of it, like I said, that it does feel like Rocky the Musical.
This is 80s music.
Who said that? What?
I said oozes 80s music.
Oh, for sure.
Indeed.
But we just gotta rattle it off. So like, again, we do hear Eye of the Tiger in the opening credits, but we've already heard that in 3. But like, you got like hit after hit after hit. You've got Living in America. You've got Burning Heart by Survivor, which is one of their other great songs besides
Double or Nothing with Kenny Loggins
yeah.
and Gladys Knight.
Yeah. You got Hearts on Fire, of course, is probably one of the most famous songs in the whole thing. And you've got and we mentioned Bill this is the only Rocky film that Bill Conti was not on the score. It's Vince DiCola, who also did the score for the Transformers, the movie, the animated one. But like, I think his music is incredible in this. Like the tracks, War and Training Montage. I think those are just awesome as far as training music goes. Oh yeah, the other one was No Easy Way Out, by Robert Tepper, if I recall. Um, but yeah, this just hit after hit after hit, and I'm like, man, this is incredible stuff. Like, I
I
think.
say Eye of the Tiger is still my favorite. Even in
Mhm,
these songs, because they are all great songs, and I loved every one of them.
for sure.
I'm just a bigger fan of Eye of the Tiger, personally. So, but that said, yeah, it was an incredible. I mean, I am definitely not one to get soundtracks to movies at all. But I would definitely listen to the soundtrack without watching the movie.
Oh, and I did as a kid, like, all the time. This was definitely in my rotation. And yet we don't hear "Gonna Fly Now" once in this. Like, you might hear it a little bit, like, you hear it
Yeah.
you hear it very briefly even in 5, but, like, here you don't hear it once, which again, Eye of the Tiger was kind of a secondary theme, so you do hear that. But, like, the original music that they do put all their effort behind, again,
Yeah,
it just kicks so much ass that you're just
it
like,
does.
but you're like, I don't even care because it just the new music in this is so good. Like, I don't even care we don't get to hear "Gonna Fly Now," because they easily could have run that into the ground, so I'm glad that they didn't. But it's like, man, just well, one the other thing is besides just being great songs to listen to just on their own, and I wish more movie soundtracks like that were not musicals. I wish that more of them did this, which is the songs lyrically, they do drive the story forward, which
Oh
is, and
yeah,
they
they
do
picked the
speak
right
to,
songs.
well, they speak to the internalization of the characters, and that's something that you don't necessarily hear with a lot of movies. A lot of soundtracks that like they want to get a popular song in there just to say that they have a popular song so that they can appeal to a certain demographic, or at least they did back in the 80s 90s, when appealing to Gen X kids, when that was a big thing and you did it through the music. That was a huge part of the selling factor of the movie, was that the soundtrack would be a hit, and a lot of the times you'd have songs that didn't necessarily match what the characters were going through. Not that that really mattered, in their eyes. It just so happened here you had these absolutely kick-ass songs, but they all drove the story forward. Like, Hearts on Fire is perfect for the moment in terms of the story.
Yes, they
No
should
Easy
do
Way Out
so.
is perfect for it. Burning Heart is perfect.
I've never
Li-
wanted to put a movie together, or direct a movie, but if I ever did, it would definitely, the music would definitely be like that, driving the story forward, and be songs that would, that would fit what you saw in the scene.
Oh, for sure, and this one does it incredibly well. And even Living in America, as excessive
Oh,
as it is,
that was perfect
yeah, it
for
fits.
when they put it in.
Well, it fits perfectly, and it also fits Apollo Creed's character too, even though
Yeah,
it's James Brown being James Brown, but it's like it fits Apollo Creed's character too, because
perfectly. Yeah,
that's what his character, because his character overcame odds too, and he strove to achieve the American dream, and his particular brand of it did eventually kind of become excessive, and that really does kind of fit that moment extremely well. Um, but yeah, do
Indeed.
we do we have a favorite song if we had to pick one? I mean, because you can't not ask that question with this movie. There's just so many good ones.
right.
You have to pick one.
Well, you know me, I picked mine.
Eye of the Tiger.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jake.
Well, I mean, the ones I know best are "Eye of the Tiger" and "Living in America." The other songs just they're not as iconic to me because I just haven't heard them as much.
Mhm.
But I liked most of them. I'd be hard pressed to say Eye of the Tiger might be the one that would win just because it's the one I know the best. You know,
Mhm. Tammy, favorite song?
I guess I'd probably have to go with Eye of the Tiger.
Everyone's going with the one that was from 3. But that's okay. It's in this movie, so it counts. Dave?
It's a toss up between Living in America and Eye of the Tiger for me, at least in this one, because James Brown is iconic too. I mean,
He's awesome.
you've got to give him credit for doing like a whole performance of that. I mean, am I wrong in thinking that the song was also in Coming to America with Eddie Murphy, or no?
Not sure. I haven't seen
Okay.
it. Dustin?
could
haven't
very
seen it?
well.
I feel like that song was maybe in there for like a few seconds, like maybe in like a travel scene or whatever. Like I seem to remember Living in America over either like credits or just like a shot of New York or whatever it was.
It'd be appropriate for the subject matter.
Yeah, I feel like it is in there, but I can't remember completely. So well, for me, I cannot for the life of me remember the music in this, which I'm sure is going to piss everyone off.
Well, you gotta
I didn't
listen
have
to
one.
it separately because it's just kick-ass song after kick-ass song. Definitely worth having in one's rotation.
When I heard
I
Living
mean,
in America, it did make me think of Coming to America movie. So, possibly it was in there, but I definitely made me think of it.
I guess I will have to go with that one because it's the only music I do remember.
Mhm.
And it also kind of plays up like what's about to happen too, as just,
Good build up.
Apollo is not taking this seriously. Like he's in like a really upbeat mood, and it's like it's like you don't know you're in danger.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's almost like
Yeah.
boastful and challenging. Yeah.
Kind of the calm before the storm.
Well, yeah,
Um,
he's full on looking at it as an exhibition match, which is what it's supposed to be.
And he's basically
yeah.
skipping around Drago like like almost like I don't know. It just looked like really showy and
yeah, he
kind
really
of girly.
well, Apollo's style was always very light on his feet. That was very intentional. But yeah, he does spend the first part of the fight just kind of dodging him. But
It's a good thing to do, but
yeah, exactly. But I think my favorite of the tracks with lyrics would easily be "Living in America." I absolutely love that song. But I have to give credit to Vince DiCola's 2 tracks, Training Montage and War, which those are incredible tracks. I listen to those all the time. Absolutely love them. Oh yeah, I just remembered one little detail about the fight itself between Rocky and Ivan Drago. And I wish Brandon was on because he could confirm or deny this, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. You look at what they're actually doing with each other, and they're picking Rocky picks him up at one point, and they're shoving each other and doing all this stuff that would probably get them disqualified or penalized in some way, and just all these little things that I'm like, there's no way that would fly. Even in the Soviet Union, would that fly? I don't know.
yeah.
You know,
Well, it was Drago that was starting it. I mean, Drago was doing it. That's finally why Rocky had enough, and he just picked him up and slammed him
I
They
know,
even
but I'm
say
just
just
in any real fight, would that fly? Even in the Soviet Union, I don't know.
Well,
But
it was more like a wrestling match or a street fight than it was boxing at that point.
Yeah, but
there was quite a few times.
that's
Even when
one
he
of
was
those
fighting,
little moments that I'm like, yeah, right. That
well,
would
even
never.
when Drago was fighting Apollo, he did it to him. He threw him a few times, and that was in America.
That's
So
true.
that
Which
was.
again, I wish Brandon was here so he could confirm or deny that, because
Yeah, I don't know much about boxing, but I kind of think you're right that it would at least be some kind of fine or something. I mean,
I would think so. Now I
I
get
don't know if
that
they
it's
have the qualifications, but
well, and I get that it's in the Soviet Union. It's that. Oh, and the other important detail: Rocky actually had to forfeit the title or to vacate the title
yeah, to
in
go
order
to
to
the
do
America.
it. So he
Which
was
makes sense because
serious.
he's supposed to. That if you're a champion, you have to defend your championship, and he had to go train to fight this guy. He knew how to train better than he ever did in his life, so he didn't have time to fight some other people. He had to train.
Well,
So
also, from what I understand, they would not at that time they would not have been allowed. The Soviet fighters were not allowed to fight in the proper championship, so he would have had to be. This would be like an extra liminal match, no matter what.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and that's part of why assuming that the Soviet government is funding this thing, which I guess they would, because they wouldn't have had private enterprise to do it. So then they're obviously their hopes rest on Drago, and so they're trying to kind of make the Soviet Union's presence on the world stage as far as boxing and other sports goes. They're trying to make it more legit, and so that's, and they even say on the news thing that they had to, after getting through the legal red tape, so obviously there's something in the way of what they would normally have to go through to do that. I mean, I remember we actually boycotted some of the or I think it was the 1980 Olympics we boycotted, if I recall. Yeah, so I mean, that was very much a thing as far as what we did versus what they did, or what we would tolerate, what they wouldn't tolerate based on their aggression or whatever. But yeah, that's an interesting thing. Oh yeah, the other thing I thought about with the fight itself is besides like all the slow-mo on the people getting all the sweat and the blood and the spit and all that stuff, is Stallone also, and you saw this in 2, 3, and 4 both, especially 4. Stallone really likes not just the slow-mo punches, but he also likes the close, the no, in slow-mo, which you saw that in 2, 3, and especially 4. And I'm like, yeah, he's really perfected that. And then now, if you do it, you don't even, it's obviously done comedically if you do it now, but you don't even know that you're referencing what he pioneered in terms of how to shoot a slow-mo fight and how to do the slow-mo. No. There's a lot of that in this movie.
I did Revenge of the Sith.
That's right.
Darth Vader.
Well, and to tie it back into Final Fight as well. I mean, we said that a little bit with how kind of slimmed down Stallone looked in 3 when he fought Clubber Lang, and how Little Mac always is so much smaller than his opponents in Punch Out. Or did I say Final Fight? I meant Punch Out. But yeah, Punch Out. If ever there was a Punch Out boss in this series, it would have been Ivan Drago, because Stallone has to
Ivan Drago seemed a little bit kind of like Super Macho Man in a way.
a little bit, but like Stallone has to punch, reach over his head practically to hit him, and that is basically
that's what reminds me of that one line that they said a little advice for fighting, get a ladder.
Yeah.
Rocky said to Apollo, let's get a ladder, because he towers over Apollo and Rocky. It's kind of like Hulk Hogan did.
Oh, totally. But like this, if ever there was, a Punch Out movie, I think it would be this movie, because it has a lot in common
Well, if
with
they
it.
ever made a Punch Out movie, they should ask Dolph Lundgren.
Yeah, I mean, well, this is basically, I think, as close as we're ever going to get, or should I say Punch Out probably took a lot of inspiration from this, but
Yeah.
just it's the same idea of the tough little fighter versus the much bigger opponent, some of the framing even kind of reminds me of it. But yeah, this so we mentioned music. We have to mention
Production.
we have to mention so each montage we already mentioned the editing, but also like the locations of the montage because they were able with No Easy Way Out, they were able to turn a montage into all he's doing is just driving in his car, and they use
Right.
a lot of footage from the other movies. So it's not really anything new that we're being shown. It's just trying to replicate what happens with a lot of people's when the people's minds are racing or their lives are flashing before their eyes or they're remembering things. They will kind of people's minds will cut together a lot of disparate footage and things like that. So they definitely replicated that well because I was watching it back and I was like, is Stallone like doing a big victory lap that, oh, gee whiz, I made 4 movies that I didn't expect to make? But I look back on it and I was like, no, it actually does fit. Each clip does fit the moment, and it does
Yeah, it does.
pretty accurately replicate how human brains do kind of tend to jump around in memory. So that's not really like production so much as it is intelligently using previous footage to tell Rocky's state of mind in terms of the visuals and the music. But then meanwhile, once we get to Siberia/Wyoming, you do see a lot of scene changes with those cabins, and then of course with the big mountain where he goes Drago, which we have to mention. That's like the big famous Rocky triumphant moment in this movie. Um, but yeah, those were real locations in Wyoming, and it's just kind of amazing how they were able to fake Wyoming as Siberia.
Yeah.
I think everything else is pretty much interiors at that point, and obviously you can fake that anywhere. But they actually, as far as production value, I think they do a really good job of making the inside of the Soviet arena look pretty authentic, as far as I can tell. Do we have anything specific about production?
It looked pretty good, like I said. I mean, I've never been to Siberia, but it looked like how I would imagine Siberia looks. So I mean, I actually it looked so well. That's why I knew where I looked it up because I wanted to know where it was, if it was actually filmed there or not. I didn't think it was, but I was just curious, so I looked it up. So I thought the production was pretty good. I mean, everywhere looked like it did, like it was supposed to, or how I think it was supposed to look, and everything. Everything. The fight looked great. The fights look mostly realistic. I mean, yeah, it's some not here and there, but it is entertainment too. So
Yeah. Well, I
in
found it
the,
just amusing how many things they do that if this were like a properly
right.
sanctioned fight, there's no chance that they could do this.
If this
Uh,
was, like, I don't watch real boxing, but to me, it's not entertaining. But the fights in the Rocky movies are definitely more entertaining than real boxing is. So
yeah. Well,
that's what I like.
I think we have to give some special shout outs to the advances in the makeup department, which I think that the makeup in the first one was quite good, especially relative to how little money they had. But
Oh yeah,
nowadays it's like very slick. They've kind of got it down to a science. If anything, you could say that the sheer amount of sweat and bodily fluids, it's like, is it possibly even a little too much? Relative to a real fight, but again, of course, this isn't close to that, because as I
I
recall,
imagine you'd be sweating a lot.
well, sweat, yeah, I could buy that, but like in terms of just how many like blood, sweat, tears, it's like, yeah, this thing is just like the final fight is just dripping in fluids, and I'm like, would a real fight get that far? I don't think so. But again, real fights also, there are plenty of real fights that they're over in the first round, and obviously that's not exactly Rocky tradition now, is it? Most Rocky fights go all 15 rounds.
Yeah.
Even when they perhaps shouldn't, except the fight with Clubber Lang was
You
relatively short.
think that both fights were, And you think that's crazy. I mean, okay, so I looked this up too because I wasn't exactly sure how many each round was, and it's 3 minutes. So 15 rounds, 3 minutes. It's 45 minutes of fighting. That's a
Mhm.
lot of fucking time. If anyone ever been into a fight, I mean, I know it's not a professional fight,
Yeah.
but any fight is usually going to last 5 minutes tops.
Yeah.
Like a street fight, and then even professional fights aren't usually going to last that long.
Well, that's
Um,
why
Gotta
they
be
have
able
to
to
have.
stand your
so,
ground for at
yeah.
least
I mean,
a lot.
wrestling, but we all know wrestling is staged.
Well, but
So
that's why they have to have several fighters on the card, and that's why it's no for the main event. Well, they have to because I mean, otherwise you're there for at
yeah,
most 40. At most you're there for 45
but 45
minutes.
minutes is a long fucking time for a fight. Is all I'm saying, and it really is. I mean,
Yeah,
45
but
minutes
you
is
know
a
what I mean. Like if
very
you're
long
gonna
time.
spend a night out, you want to see more than just
Oh,
that.
I agree, but I'm just saying, as far as a fighter goes, that's a long time to be in a fight with
Oh yeah,
anyone.
for a fighter, for sure. I mean, any one round would take it out of you, let alone the
Yeah,
full 15.
I
that's what I'm
also
saying.
agree that the locations that they chose looked exactly like they would have if I thought of Siberia. I I looked at the cabin when it first came up, and it looked like an like out in the wilderness, in the smack dab of nowhere,
Oh,
and
for sure. Well, and let's keep
and
in
the
mind
sled
Siberia.
dogs. I mean, the sled dogs sleds. Those kind of remind me of like Iron Will.
Well, and it reminded all the icicles everywhere reminded me of Dr. Zhivago, which obviously is appropriate.
That I could see.
But the thing that needs to be said is that so Russia. Well, it was the Soviet Union was more than just Russia. It was quite a lot of countries, but like just Russia alone, biggest country on the planet in terms of the land mass, but also very densely populated sparsely populated, very sparsely populated. Not the least of which is in Siberia. I mean, that's a lot of land, but not a lot of people living on it, just because it's too bloody cold and too hostile. And so they definitely portray the remoteness of it and the fact that whoever would live there is obviously got to be pretty tough. But also you see like and this is pretty true from what I understand is that the people that lived in rural areas of the Soviet Union they hadn't really advanced all that much technologically, so you still saw the horse and buggies practically. um, so they definitely were able to reflect that pretty well. Um, but let's see, we covered off montages, effects, spent a lot of time on music. How could we not? When we said favorite songs, do we have a favorite scene or line of dialogue? Let's start with Tammy.
Um, I guess my favorite. I have I guess two. I really really like that montage of him in training, of Rocky. Well, they're both in training, but I like the Rocky end of it better.
Well, which one? Hearts on Fire or like because there was two halves of that.
um,
Like pre Adrian or post Adrian, I should say, because she's not there for the first half.
Post.
Yeah, that's Hearts on Fire. That whole thing.
But then of
Um,
course I like the ending fight, because like I said, I know David probably heard me sitting there going, I was going like, get him, Rocky, get him.
oh yeah, it's hard not to get. See, I told you it's hard not to get wrapped up in these movies, especially when you've spent so much time with this character and you get to know him outside of the ring as well as in the ring, and
I
you
know I surprised myself too because I was sitting there going, get him,
Yeah, that's how I was when I was a kid. Like I was glued to the screen each movie. I was like just wanting him to beat the crap out of the opponent. And
And
I was always like, Put your
you know,
gloves up, guard your face." But
this was my first time watching it. I've heard about it, but I had never watched it till now. So I
mhm.
had all the enthusiasm or whatever, I guess, like like when you watched it the first time, probably as a kid, you know,
Mm-hmm.
I was getting into the same kind of thing, you know.
Well, and again, I watched them one after the other, so I was just like hyped up like for hours straight. You know, it was like a very, very memorable experience because it's like one after the next, after the next. You just want the adrenaline to keep going. You know.
I think by the time we get done with all of this, the whole thing will be a memorable experience for me, considering the only one I remember actually watching out of all of them is number one until now.
Mm-hmm. Well, and
So
it might even be somewhat of a melancholic experience when it's all done, just because you're like, oh, well, where's the next one? You know, because it again, you feel like you get to know this character throughout all
Yeah, and
the.
I think Tammy and I will have to visit the creeds while we're at it too, because then
I
we're
would recommend
not
it.
going to be like fish out of water when you're talking spoilers.
It's I would recommend it just because it
Hey,
helps to complete things a bit.
not that it's the same thing, but
It's
David
not.
got me to watch the Fast and the
Yeah, I'm
Furious,
gonna watch them too.
and I didn't, because I wasn't interested. I wasn't interested in them, and I ended up watching them, and then sure enough, just like this one, yeah, okay, I want to watch the next one.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
into
I want to watch the next one. You know,
random aside, as far as continuing the series, when I brought the computer up tonight and logged into IMDb, what should be on the IMDb
Yeah. Creed
homepage?
3.
Creed
The
3
series,
trailer.
Yeah. I know.
the series is
Directed by Michael B. Jordan in his directorial debut, which
I
oh,
is
there's
pretty
know,
another
very
cool.
one.
cool. Yep.
Yeah, so and Michael B. Jordan is Adonis Creed.
He's a decent actor most of the time. I don't like
He's
everything.
awesome. I love
And
him.
it was
I couldn't
followed up by
stand him
the
in Fantastic Four.
and it was followed up by the trailer for the new Stallone series. Was it Tulsa King or whatever? I
Yeah.
thought that was kind of
How
funny.
appropriate.
Yeah.
Jake, did you have a favorite scene or line of dialogue?
I think my favorite line might have been that hit the one in the middle. I
Yeah, that's a
I
good
thought
one.
that was a good line. Um, as far as favorite scenes, I think I probably will go with the contrasting training regimens of the two characters. I thought that was a pretty, as far as the montages go in this movie, it was definitely the most effective one.
Oh yeah.
But
It's the one
also,
everyone remembers.
I just, yeah, I like, and I may have actually seen part of that before. It did look vaguely familiar, but just, yeah, I just like the contrast between the two. And I was watching, and I was like, this is like probably the training that Rocky probably should have been doing all along, because this will turn him into a beast in the ring.
Oh, for sure. Well, I mean, he climbed. Well,
Yeah.
so James Rolfe, the angry video game nerd, he visited a bunch of locations from the Rocky films in Philadelphia, and then years later, he went to Wyoming to find the filming locations for Rocky 4, and found pretty much all of them. Couldn't quite scale he scaled the mountain where he goes Drago. He scaled that mountain, but couldn't quite scale the same mountain that was used in the long shots, which were filmed from a helicopter, and that's a different mountain. But it is a very precipitous mountain because it's in the Rocky Mountain range. How appropriate! But it was a very precipitous cliff that only a few people have dared to really climb. But again, the visual metaphor of that is very, very strong. He's literally conquered the mountain, you know, in a very literal sense. So obviously, he's ready to take on the beast that is Drago. Now, Kroll, did you mention a favorite scene?
No,
Go ahead.
the montage, the training montage.
Well, Hearts on Fire.
Yeah, the whole training montage is great. I absolutely
We
love
have
it.
to specify because there are a bunch of them.
Yeah, the training montage between him and Drago, you know, showing the differences in what they're doing. I really love it, and like I said, I really love Rocky style, and I'm not a big bad person like some people are, but Rocky looked pretty cool with the beard.
I like the beard on him. I think it
Yeah.
works.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Look pretty good on him. A little bit of ruggedness, just but not too crazy. Yeah, it would look pretty cool on him.
But it's appropriate relative to his lack of, proper shaving facilities.
And I do want to mention one more thing about the final fight. Notice he was more original Rocky style.
in
More
terms of
take hits and then hit.
yeah.
More like I guess Rocky 2 because he was hitting right and left, so it wasn't just a southpaw. We did a little bit of dodging and a little bit of dancing. Not really dancing, but a little bit of dodging, but not too much.
He's not trying to fight like
Yeah.
Apollo.
Yeah, he definitely like that. I loved the way he fought in the third one because he was so great. Just that he matched his style and Apollo's style so great. This one he kind of went a little bit back for his style, but I think against who he was fighting, it worked much better.
Yeah. Well, he was also fighting with a lot more I guess rage or purpose, I guess.
Yeah.
And so
Exactly.
you could see that because he does again noticeably improve as a fighter throughout the whole thing. And
But
this
he never really did the come on hit me or keep going, like he did with
he did a little bit, but
he
it
did
wasn't quite like Clever
once or
Lang.
twice, kind of just to see if you can just a little bit of intimidation, I guess, or whatever. But yeah, because it was way too personal for him to be doing jokes like that. As much as he wanted the title back in the last one and all the other stuff, Creed was his friend, and this guy killed him. And the worst yet, okay, things happen in sports and it's horrible. Boy, the guy was just like, if he dies, he dies. I mean, he totally did not care, and that's the worst thing about it, and that's what makes him a killer. That's what I'll say he's a killer. He's not just like his wife said, oh, he's not a killer, he's a fighter. No. The fact that the way he said and had no remorse at all makes him a killer.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's my opinion. And as far as favorite lines go, there's so many great ones. I mean, the lines, the robot is just
Happy birthday,
absolutely
Polly.
just great. And the line, like when he's leaving, brush your teeth, and how many times I have to tell you, she was just like
She loves me.
like a nagging wife. It was so
Yeah.
fucking great. I have to mention that.
That was funny.
And of course, I'd already mentioned they hit the one in the middle, so of course I love that. So there's quite a few lines that are just really great. Every Rocky movie has some great lines in it. So hard to break them down. But
it is.
A few of my favorites.
Dave, did you say your favorite line and or scene?
No, not yet. I'll have to say my a couple of my favorite scenes are definitely the training montage, that first one, because you definitely see a lot of old school strength shown through that montage, especially on Rocky's end. And there's something I like about Drago's entrance in that beginning of the battle scene. It's almost like royalty, almost. It's like he's just this big, massive Hulk, and he just stands there. He definitely has an entrance. And
when they're in Russia.
Yeah, when they're in Russia.
Yeah. He's an absolutely massive human being, and they really accentuate that.
But I definitely do like that line with just hit the one in the middle. I know it's repetitive of the you others who like it, but it's
a great line.
Dustin, favorite line or scene? You may not.
I think I think my favorite line is still just "You're going to lose," because I've ended up saying that like kind of a lot in different competitive games that I've
You will lose.
been playing over the years. So I've never said it before killing anyone, but
Well, not in real life, but
well, no, but at any rate, like I just I like that because it's that whole scene just raises the stakes so quickly and so sharply that it's really enjoyable to go to. I don't know. I just like how it's almost like we're in a different movie all of a sudden. It's
yeah,
like,
and I think that's
we're
very
having fun.
intentional.
Oh wait, oh.
Yeah, that's very intentional, and you
Like
notice
the
that you
tone
get your
switch.
hands up, chub. Bong. Yeah, can't make the gloves
Just
go down.
turbo killed, yeah.
Yeah.
So and then the final fight is really good too because you kind of get the sense that Rocky's let them punch him in the face strategy is not going to be a very good idea this time. So he has to try something else, and he really doesn't. But you get the sense that that maybe they should have done that. Other than that, like the final battle was really good. So, and especially seeing Drago kind of falter for the first time, like there's a moment during that I really like, where the official is like, "You're making us look stupid," and he pushes him, and he just like grabs the guy by the throat.
Yeah, I love that too.
And it's like this little like bureaucrat like completely forgot who or what he was talking to.
Well, and also it's well, I think what Rocky ultimately wins, I think, because it's his focus, his indomitable spirit, but also the fact that he made Ivan Drago bleed, and he revealed, oh yeah, he is indeed a human being, but like Ivan couldn't really fathom that, and he is basically just a tool of the state and a willing tool of the state, but then he realizes that, I'm fighting for me, but also that's not enough, and he it's not so much his pride has been wounded, because again he as an individual has been kind of beaten out of him more or less, but it's more just the idea of like, I am not this machine man, the Superman that I've been trained to be, and I think that it is partially psychological as well as
that is kind of one of my favorite tropes. Like you have a villain that's so strong they've never been like hurt or challenged before,
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
and then they have to face that and they just don't know what to do.
Or
Well,
an antagonist, rather.
They even make explicit David and Goliath comparisons, which that might have even been a little too obvious, but again, don't necessarily look for Rocky IV in terms of subtlety outside of references to Michelangelo's Pieta.
One of
may
my
not have-
favorite
think that,
one of my favorite examples of what we were just the whole thing with Drago. It reminded me of the scene in Dr. Horrible where Captain Hammer is injured.
Yeah.
And he's like, "I'm in pain. I think this is what pain feels like."
Yeah.
And then he just rushes off in disgrace. And the next time you see him, he's on a counselor's couch because he can't deal with pain.
Yeah, he didn't think it was possible,
Right. And yeah, Drago has that moment. It's not as played up for humor here. It's more of a, again, it kind of gives
like Smallville.
gives Rocky the edge he needs, really. Yeah.
First time clock bleeds in Smallville, he has that look of what the hell is this and why is it hurting? What is this thing called pain?
That reminds me of like that little like moment from that one episode of Gravity Falls where Bill takes over Dipper's body. And he's just like, "Wow, pain is hilarious!" And he's just like slamming Dipper's arm in a drawer. It's like, man, these arms are durable.
Yeah. Let's see. I think I got to everybody. My favorite scene is probably Living in America, just because like I did not expect to see that, but boy, oh boy, am I glad that they put it in there. And it's one of those things where there are certain elements of the Rocky sequels, some of which are a little bit more either out of place or you could probably trim them or whatever. Like as much as I love the robot doesn't really serve that much of a purpose story wise. But like Living in America is an example of one where it is big and excessive and memorable, but I think it does serve a very important purpose for illuminating that contrast, illuminating Apollo Creed's character, and also, though we don't know it yet, giving him a proper send off, as a character. Very memorable and obviously great musical number. But favorite line of dialogue. I mean, it's kind of a cliche, but I do come back to "I must break you," just because, like, man, yeah, that sums up his character perfectly, and it's again one of the best villain lines of all time. Well, and it's also just the idea that he thinks in terms of destruction and breaking things. A close second would be whatever Ivan Drago hits, he destroys. That'd be a close second. Uh, and we kind of forgot about Ivan Drago's wife, Brigitte Nielsen. Um, she's kind of because he's kind of a cartoon character in his own right, but she's kind of that way as far as like the icy Soviet blonde, who she does all the talking for him, and just there's not a whole lot to her outside of her just being icy, but again, she's memorable, all right, mostly because she does the talking for him.
I
you
don't
know,
think you guys really watch wrestling much. But there was they did kind of a spin on Ivan and her.
Lana,
Oh yeah, Lana and Rusev, because
yeah,
Rusev didn't really talk a lot, and he was kind of like unbeatable at first, and Lana did all the talking, and she was the hot blonde. Well, she wasn't his wife yet, in the storyline, but of course she got there. We all knew that. So yeah, it was definitely a take on Drago and his wife. And I
of
like that.
course.
It was really good the way they did that. That was a good storyline. When they broke up, it was actually stupid and ruined Rusev. He ended up
Hmm.
leaving the company or getting fired because of it. And ruined Lana too. So, anyways, I just wanted to make that comparison there.
Oh yeah, well, wrestling's gotten a lot from movies and pop culture, so
Yeah.
makes sense. But yeah, that was Rocky 4, which again, highest grossing film of the series, much beloved by audiences to this day, enough to even get a director's cut, which is saying a lot. And again, but it's important to note that this is where the series was really starting to falter in terms of the critical reception, and the fans were still with it, obviously, and the box office results showed that. But even those who enjoyed it kind of had to admit that this is where, where do you go after this? Like I said, the only place you could go is take him into space or something, and obviously they didn't do that. But the question became, once he's fought the Super Russian and won, where does the series go from here? He's fought the biggest and the baddest between Apollo and Clubber Lang and Ivan Drago. It's like, where can the series go from here? How much longevity does this series have? And
We
that
get
is
our
going.
answer pretty quickly in Rocky 5.
Oh yeah.
Which,
Well, not
oh Lord, one of the worst things I've ever seen.
Rocky
definite.
5 is a great movie.
Well,
I think
definitely the
it's
worst of
probably the
the.
weakest Rocky
Yeah,
movies,
it's
but
the
it's still
worst
a
of the
great movie.
series, but that's going to be an interesting
I still really
discussion.
enjoy it.
That's going to be an interesting discussion because I have a lot to say about it. But we're gonna get into that. But
Well, remember, not too
I have
much because
plenty
we
to
got
say
two
too, but it's
movies.
not good.
we're gonna dive into that more extensively. But there was a 5-year gap between this and Rocky 5, because I imagine that the question of where this series could go must have loomed pretty heavily. I mean, up to and including getting that kind of reference in Spaceballs, Rocky 5,000, because Rocky 5 hadn't even come out yet. And I think that was, I'm bringing it up now just because, like, where else could the series have gone from there? And that obviously was part of what informed their
Well,
decision.
it wasn't space. It was in space balls. So there we
Yeah,
go.
but we will get there when we get there, but just let that linger in your minds before we join you down this
What
particular
was funny was
pathway.
Back to the Future made fun of Jaws that way. with Jaws
That's
3000.
right.
Uh,
But that was Jaws 19.
Oh, I thought it was 3000.
No,
Okay.
no, it was Jaws 19. But yeah, that's there was a 5-year gap. There had been a 3-year gap between movies prior to that, but there was a 5-year gap between Rocky 4 and 5, and so that question did loom large indeed, despite what a success this movie was. But let that all linger in your heads before we go the distance with you again.
Definitely. So why don't we go around and do our outros and tell everybody who we are. So, Dustin, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Hi, after this, I'm gonna have to head out real quick. But so I collect horror movie stuff here in Milwaukee. I have a YouTube channel for showing off the things I've found. I haven't really been able to make anything for a while because I've been pretty preoccupied with well, a lot of stuff. But we're hoping to put some new videos up at least soon. I know I say that every week, but I mean it this time. Damn it! So you can follow my YouTube channel, The Crypt of Horrors, and also my Instagram, The Crypt of Horrors, where I'm much better on uploading stuff more regularly. I'm doing 31 Days of Horror, so trying to watch one horror movie every day. And I've been mostly successful. Like occasionally, like I will watch the movie, but I'll forget to like make the post about it until like the next day. So we're still doing that, but yeah, it's going all right. You can also find me on Twitter as Cryptaxis, because some jerk has Cryptaxis. Report them. They haven't tweeted anything in like 5 years, but at any rate, so yeah, that's who I am, and yeah, follow my stuff. So,
Very cool. Thank you for
good night.
coming on. Night. Heading over to you, Jake. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
All right, I'm Kotobukijake. I am the co-host of SeptumSin versus the World, where we talk about all kinds of physical media and look at. We do pickup videos. We do right now for our Horrorween, which we play around with every year. We're doing a series of videos. I think the first one is up, and the second one should be up this week. I think, where we're looking at anime that would be appropriate Halloween season viewing. And along those lines, next week we'll be doing our anime anticlimax. Normally we do it the very end of the month, but I guess because, well, the very end of the month is Halloween, it seemed make sense to go a little earlier. But we'll be doing that blood-soaked yarn called Hellsing Ultimate. Should be interesting. And meanwhile, I'm a work full-time for the county, and it keeps me pretty busy. But I also am the co-founder of RVA Homegrown Natives, a native plant nursery, and when I have time, I do a lot of viewing and reading, not near as much as I'd like, but I like to come on with these fine folks a couple times a week to discuss various things, and am currently enjoying going through the Rocky movies, and I do have Creed. It's on Blu-ray, which means I'm going to have to fight for the main TV to watch it, but it might be possible. Hopefully I can get hold of the second one and watch that too, but I don't know if I'll get that all in before next week's discussion. But it would be nice. But like I said, it's been an interesting run through, and look forward to the grand conclusion next week.
Oh yeah, you'll get extra credit if you get through all the Creed movies.
Alrighty. Heading over to you, Dane. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
I am Dane Kyle. I'm a filmmaker and a YouTuber. My channel is Dangerous Arts, DANEJUROUS Arts, and I have done 2 series Oztober, where I did 31 days, 31 Wizard of Oz adaptations. I recently got new thumbnails together, and I've been redistributing them amongst the Oz Facebook groups and on my page and everything. As well as August in Wonderland, where I did 31 days, 31 different Alice in Wonderland film and TV adaptations, and that one was bigger and better and had a storyline that wove through it. And now I'm gathering the assets for my next deep dives, which I've got several videos scheduled and planned. So there's a lot of content coming up, and I also want to get back into making another short film if I can. So yeah, lots coming my way.
Alrighty. Very good. Heading over to you, Carl. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Well, I don't work, but I watch TV, watch movies, video games. Plus it's Halloween night, Halloween month. So I'm trying to watch more horror. I went and did I watched Halloween 2018, Halloween Kills, and Halloween Ends. So I enjoyed them. I enjoyed the three movies. I still like Rob Zombie's better, but it's just pure killing fun. These are a little more fun, and I like the way it ended. It was interesting, and I enjoyed it. No spoilers. Also, decided to finally get caught up on Walking Dead. Again, thought that was kind of appropriate time, and I'm also currently getting caught up on Fear the Walking Dead, and also going to be in that anime discussion. So, gonna finish watching Hellsing Unlimited. I started it, so far it seems decent. We'll see. And yeah, I also watched Zombies versus Wrestlers, which was a funny movie. Yeah, it is funny movie. I think Undertaker would have been great in it, but they didn't have him, unfortunately. But yeah, that's me. And I come on this podcast, and Sunday I come on the podcast with Dave and Tammy on Delusions of Grandeur, and I also I pop up here and there and all kinds of other podcasts. So you never know where you're gonna see me or hear me, but I'm around always. So that's me.
Alrighty. Heading over to you, Tammy. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Well, I go on this channel and another and talk about movies with my fiance and other people, and I do collect myself um, and I enjoy all the discussions, and it's it's entertaining to get everybody else's opinion and get in these discussions. So
Well, I really am glad that you're liking the Rocky series, because I do think it's a rewarding journey.
The other series that I was surprised at her for liking was the Godfather trilogy. That I got her to watch some years back, because she's always one of those people who tells me, no, I don't want to watch it. No, I don't want to watch it. Well, why don't you try it? And we'll see what happens.
Well, and
I
that
thought you
also
were
had
surprised
Talia
about the
Shire in
Fast
it.
and Furious one.
And that also had Talia Shire in it.
But in any case, my name is David Streggy. I'm one of the founding fathers of Inside Movies Galore. And Dane is as well. So just wanted to put that out there because he helped start this with me back in the day. So thank you for coming along with us on this magical film journey with us as we broach our way to at least the end of the Rocky era. Hopefully, maybe in the future, we'll study the Creed films as well here on the channel. But I also moonlight under a different channel called Delusions of Grandeur, where we also podcast on that channel. But I also put up video reviews, video pickups, and other things as well on the channel. So hopefully you can go to either channel, find something that you like, comment down below whether you liked the film discussion, the film, or anything about what we said. And, continue to watch us on our journey as we connect with the other two films, at least in the initial original Rocky run. So thank you for listening. Have a great day, evening, or morning, wherever you are. And please, under no circumstances, think that you are a super soldier and go up against this Rocky character.
He's made of iron, after all.
Well, we are all only human anyways. So,
I will crush you.
Drago! We're just shouting out all the famous lines now.
On that note, everyone...
You die.
Do svidania.